Thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm your host, Daniel Davis. In tumultuous times, we find ourselves finding our money just dissipating. Many people are trying to find traditional ways to save for retirement, but why do we do that? Ultimately, in the end, we're just losing anyway. Joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today is author of a wonderful book called Killing Sacred Cows. That's right, overcoming the financial myths that destroying our prosperity. Joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today is its author, Garrett Gunderson, and we're going to talk about how we can find ways that we can destroy all these wonderful myths that are trying to get us on the wrong path and to find ourselves on the right path to prosperity. I'd like to welcome Garrett Gunderson here to the Beyond 50 radio program today. Garrett, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. I guess we either destroy the myths or they kind of destroy us, right?
Now, you know what I really like about your book is just that it starts right out in the beginning to talk about what this is and why we always buy into these things that ultimately, lead us in the wrong path a lot of times. Now, what happened in your experience that you decided this book should be written for the people to understand why we need to stop buying into that herd mentality, so to speak?
Well, people that read the book, Killing Sacred Cows, I'll just have to admit right up front that it's a confessional, although people don't know that. I've gone through and believed in so many of these myths and practiced them, and not only practiced them, was rewarded for teaching them because I was in the financial services industry. And so, one of the first ways that I discovered that I was really encapsulated and engrossed by some of these myths was in my marriage. I just had graduated from college, and then when my wife graduated from college, we got married. She was going to be a teacher, and I didn't want her to go buy new clothes because if she bought new clothes, that might hurt our net worth. We needed to sacrifice. We needed to save money. We needed to compound our interest. We're in it for the long haul. We lived in this little apartment while I made 6 figures of income, and yet I owned 14 real estate properties that I rented out to other people. So I was really on this destructive path following the accumulation theory that would have hurt all other areas of my life that I consider the greater areas of wealth, like my mindset, like my relationships, like my health, because I was working so much and not eating the way that I should and exercising, and ultimately what I would consider my sole purpose, which is finding something that I was really passionate about like I am today that I can get paid for, and even better, people pay me to develop the things that I love to do most anyway, and that's a real kind of magic to life.
Mm-hmm. And it's funny because when we take a look at today's age, we're in this information age where opportunity is not only everywhere, but the fact is jurisdiction is starting to change as well. We have the ability to be able to make money not just simply by going to a job, but we can actually go online, and there are a lot of opportunities that we can make money that way and also save money in taxes. I know one of the ways that I've discovered is, through being able to do foreign currency exchanges. Now, that's just one thing. But here, traditionally, we go to a job. We're taught as we're growing up. A lot of us tend to have those money habits that our parents have. And, those old ways of just being conservative, of putting money away for a rainy day, why do we buy into those kind of habits? Who started all that to begin with?
Well, you got to think how genius it is for the financial institutions.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they are in the business to get your money. And not only get your money, get it as often as they can, to hold on to it for as long as they possibly can, and give you back the very least amount they possibly can. So that's basically their rule.
They're doing a good job at that, aren't they?
Right. And so, that's where the 401K was so brilliant for them, because not only did they now get your money, and they could do it so easily through systematic basis, and they could have provisions that the government imposed to say you can't get to the money till a certain age, and they got to make a fee not only on your money, but on money you owed the government because you hadn't paid taxes yet. So that's where a lot of this comes, is just brilliant marketing.
Now, I know that we had a financial services person who actually owns his own company outside of Washington, and he was talking about one of the reasons anyway, that during the Clinton administration that we had such a surplus was because of the development of the Roth IRA. Was that your experience?
I couldn't speak to that. I don't know. I don't know. I don't see how that could be the case, but I could look into it. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Okay.
It does make sense that people paid taxes now versus later. But as far as the ramifications and surplus, I cannot see it having that full magnitude. It might have contributed a little bit.
Okay. Now, in your book, it was interesting because people would take a look at this title and they'd say, okay, so what about the 401K? Why is it a hoax, so forth and so on? I said, you'd actually be amazed that as you start reading this book that, you know, it's really all about the things that we buy into. So why the 401K and what was the allure that made you create that particular title for people to start thinking, okay, so I bought into all these things, I was taught all these things, so why is that wrong and what do I do about it?
The 401K just happens to encapsulate so many of the myths as one vehicle. When people invest in a 401K, they think, I'm in it for the long haul. They're also taught that high-risk funds are going to generate the highest returns. They're just taught that compounding interest and that they're going to be in a lower tax bracket in the future, which I think is kind of bad news. It would mean that you have a lot less money, and that the government's changing the rules on those plans and talking about changing the rules on those plans. And it's just there were so many myths that I could convey just through the 401K hoax. But the main reason that I was picking that out is so many people were putting their money in a 401K because it was mindless, because it was easy. And it had them forget about financial responsibility. It actually lowered their financial IQ overall because they thought, oh, this is easy, I don't even have to think about it. Well, now we're seeing that because they didn't think about it, they're finding some pretty hefty losses. And they were putting their whole life in someone else's hands that was supposed to be the expert, but they didn't even know who that so-called expert was. And so it's just, the hoax is really on us, not that the 401k is bad in and of itself, but the way that we work with it, the way that we treat it, the mindset that we have behind it.
I think it's funny too, as Garrett, is that you see it in the news that people are losing their money in the stock market. They get really frustrated because all of a sudden the government's bailing out these alleged financial institutions that seem to know everything there is to know about what to do with money to help it grow, especially for their stockholders. And you think to yourself, well, okay, this is happening this year, this is kind of a fluke, but it's been happening for many decades. And you would think people would actually wake up and say, okay, what do I do with my money? How do I learn about this? With all the information that's available, that you can actually begin to, I guess, manage risk. Now, let's talk about one of those myths that you really hit on hard about, when it comes to financial risk, that, the higher the risk, the higher the reward. Now, let's talk about that particular myth, because that tends to keep people in a fear mode. Well, I don't want to risk my money, and so they'd rather be into safe, conservative investments, which, as you said, it keeps your money there.
Right? They put up the white flag and say, I'm just going to set it with the bank. And now they're going, wait, the bank may not be safe either. So it confuses people. They don't know what conservative is anymore. But, yeah, I think that high risk equals high return. Would you ever raise a family on that philosophy? Would you ever, if you drive on that philosophy, you're either going to get a lot of tickets or end up dead. It's just, I think a few Wall Street guys were in a brainstorming session, and they're having a hard time selling an investment, and they thought, how in the world can we actually sell this? And someone said, I've got a genius idea. What if we tell people that the only way that you ever get a high return is by taking a really high risk? And so the definition of risk is chance of loss. So if you increase your chance of loss, somehow that's going to increase your return? Not at all. It just doesn't work that way. But we bought into it, hook, line, and sinker, and that's why people are losing so much money in their accounts, because they thought that they needed to take high risk to get high return. Even better when someone asks you these questions. These are my favorite. On a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being that you want to take a lot of risk, 1 being you don't want to take any risk at all, what would you rank it? And what they try and embed in there, they try to get someone to believe that risk equals return so that they answer a 5. And you know what's great is now the broker has no responsibility because the broker gets to say one of two things. You took a lot of risk, or their favorite phrase, you're in it for the long haul.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen articles before this market kind of really took a dive where they were interviewing heads of these financial institutions, and they were saying, now's the time to keep contributing. And, whatever you do, don't stop. Just go with the plan. And one of the people actually said, in this article, he was quoted as saying, we would always tell people it's a good idea to contribute more. Of course they would. They want your money.
Mm-hmm.
They're not concerned with you or your plan. They want you to make money because that means they have more money under management, and they're getting their fee whether you write them a check or not. That's one of the most brilliant strategies they ever did, is that they just automatically siphon that off. So most people don't know what the expenses are, how it impacts their plan, and what it does to their bottom line. And I obviously get a little bit emotional and fired up about it because that's fine for those institutions to do that, but it's our responsibility to start asking the questions to say, what do we really want in life? Do we really have to take high risk to get high return? I don't think so. I think that there's no such thing as a risky investment, just risky investors. If you think that not knowing what you're investing in and relying upon the expert is going to get you somewhere, there's way too many financial experts that are not experts. If we had as many financial experts as were purported, I don't think we'd be in this catastrophe that we're in. How about you?
I agree with that completely. I know it's interesting. I was talking with best-selling author Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad, Poor Dad series, and, through his books, he doesn't really show you how to do things, but he gets you thinking about the importance.
He builds the context.
Yeah, what's that?
He builds great context.
Yeah, and the thing is that, he's talking about the importance of having a financial education so that you can learn to manage risk for yourself. Now, what I like about your book, Killing Sacred Cows, is the fact that you say, okay, that being true, how do we go about, once we have that financial education, to know how to manage risk in the best way possible for ourselves to make money liquid and movable? And that's something that, as you say in the book, that a lot of the financial institutions don't want you to do. They want you to do usually two things: stay in it for the long haul and diversify. Just move your, put it on all these and then just let us take care of it. You go to work. But, why is it that people don't want to take the time to learn something like this? Because I know that in the news, in magazines, books, television, radio, you name it, that they make it all seem so complicated, but actually it's a very fascinating subject, and in many ways, once you start to grasp it, finding your passion and then taking your passions and investing in those, it actually becomes not only quite easy, but very interesting.
Right, the institutions don't want people to invest in their passions. They want them to invest in the companies. Mm-hmm. And so I think people lose interest pretty quickly because the institutions can talk about betas and alphas and standard deviations and, all this type of Monte Carlo simulations. I mean, let's just use as much financial jargon to make it feel complicated so they have to rely upon us. Where if we didn't look at investments as necessarily a 401K or a mutual fund, but we looked at our greatest asset as ourselves first, and then we said, what if we diverted some of this money that was going to plans that are funding someone else's dreams, and instead moved it into our life to increase our knowledge about what we're capable of, what we could do to be more productive, and whether that's, as Kiyosaki says, your financial literacy, just about what you're currently spending money on, or whether that happens to be something that is your expertise that you want to develop, or something that you have great interest or hopefully a passion in. Now the best return you're going to get is what you could be productive and responsible for. See, we don't think of assets as ourselves or as people, and most people are only taught about financial capital. Financial capital being your money markets, your stocks, your mutual funds, your lines of credit, other people's money. But there's two other precious forms of capital that are more important than financial capital. And one is our mental capital, our creativity, our ideas, our ability to solve problems and come up with solutions, our ability to create value. That is our mental capital, And it's superior to financial capital if we develop it, if we cultivate it, if we pay attention to it. But it's just like exercise. It takes, some repetition. It takes doing it, otherwise you'll lose it. And then the other aspect of capital that's absolutely essential is relationship capital. People that we know, networks of people that we know, organizations that we're involved with, friends and family, which could be good or bad relationship capital, depending, right? But these are all ways where it doesn't take money to make money. It just takes an understanding of certain key principles. It takes an understanding of how the economy works, what money really is, and that's why I wanted Killing Sacred Cows out there, is to get beyond just forfeiting any responsibility in your money, handing it over to someone else and crossing your fingers that it will work out, and instead focusing on what can you do? What are you capable of? If you knew that these other things were myths and you could go beyond that, then what would the possibilities be for you in your life? And now you can really start to manage risk. Should everyone invest in real estate? Absolutely not. Those people that have the expertise or knowledge or some passion, that is a good investment for them. For those that just get involved because of the greed and because of the money, we've seen plenty of them get burned in the last little while. There's even fewer people that I think probably have an expertise in the stock market, yet there's so many more people investing in the stock market. If you don't understand what you're invested in, it's a gamble. It may be a more sexy and sophisticated gamble, but it's a gamble just the same.
Now, I know that on our program, it was actually earlier last year that we had someone on the program that was talking about globalization, and they were talking about the opportunities that there are to invest in global economies and markets. And you tend to hear a lot of news about, China has a big vested interest in the United States, as a lot of countries do, mainly because they felt that the United States was actually a very good investment. Sometimes now people are starting to wonder about that, but one of the key elements that he was talking about when it came to globalization and investing in global economies is that when you go to invest your money, as you're just saying right now, that it makes more sense to invest in things that you understand that make sense to you. Even Warren Buffett does that very much. In fact, it was even stated, Microsoft, as great of an investment as that would have been, he said he didn't put money in that direction because he just didn't understand computers and technology. So when it comes to investing money, you can see where it makes sense that you would actually start focusing your capital in areas that you really have not only a good understanding about, but a good passion about. You take a look at a 401K, and they dangle it in front of you as this big, safe investment. It's a government-sponsored program alleged that is going to actually save you money because you don't pay taxes, whether it's on the front end or the back end. It doesn't really matter. But the point is that your money just sits there. It doesn't do anything. And you really talk extensively in the book about how you take your money, your capital, whatever you want to call it, and you're able to move it around while still maintaining liquidity. And tell our listeners why that's important.
Well, right now, liquidity is awesome. If people are illiquid, they could be losing their assets. We're seeing foreclosures, bankruptcies at an all-time high and just almost alarming rate. But those that are liquid, this is the greatest opportunity since I've been alive. I am finding, and I work with people that are finding properties as low as 2.5 cents on the dollar, 7 cents on the dollar, 10 cents on the dollar. These assets, if someone has an expertise in real estate and cash, if you have cash, you can have those. If you need to rely on credit because you're illiquid, you cannot get access to that. So liquidity means that you can capitalize on opportunity. And cash flow is really key because if it's all tied up in net worth, there's people that lose their net worth because they have a whole bunch of equity in something, but they can't get to it if they lose a job or become disabled or something happens in their business. I've found that in my own life where I had so much money tied up rather than liquid. Once again, Killing Sacred Cows is kind of a confessional so many times of mistakes that I made and what lessons I learned from that. And I missed out on great opportunities, and I had times where it lowered my lifestyle just to keep things going. When we keep our money in motion, it also is nice because we can earn a lower return per thing that we do, but have more things going on with the same dollars. For example, this is kind of an interesting. I'll just give a real specific example, and don't rush to judgment. This was just something that I did in my life. But rather than putting money in a money market at a bank, I just chose to put money into a guaranteed insurance contract. It earned a better return than a money market and had a little bit of a tax advantage. I built a little bit of cash in there. I used that cash as a down payment on a duplex. It was 2 townhomes. And then I used the cash flow from those townhomes to repopulate that policy. And then I had more cash to buy yet another 2 townhomes or a duplex and use that cash flow to start repaying that policy. Then when those homes appreciated, I actually utilized some cash from those homes and invested it into another cash flow producing investment that had to do with real estate, which I was studying extensively at the time. And so now I had 3 assets working for me off dollars that if I would have put in a 401K would have been completely tied up. Now, if real estate's not your gig, don't even worry about the concept I just talked about. That was just something that I did. Mm-hmm. But what was nice is because I had this pool of funds in the guaranteed insurance contract, I got lines of credit as soon as there was equity, and I put it in funds where I could liquidate the funds within a certain period of time with notice. It kept liquidity in case other opportunities came up, and I built things a lot quicker. I eventually rolled those properties, not all of them, but some of them, into a commercial building that I now have as my place where I do business. And now I enjoy my real estate, and it's much more in line with my purpose and my expertise and my passion, because I have created a business where there's people that now fill up the other rooms and they complement my business. And I can do events here. And I've got certain types of equipment and a certain experience for the clients, which allows me to charge a tuition and take people through that experience. So that's just one example of something I did right early on. Now, I wouldn't do the same thing now because my passion isn't really about real estate. My passion's about something like killing sacred cows, and that's my investment because that's my intellectual property and capital that I'm trying to put out there to make a difference in the world. My program, the Freedom Fast Track, or the Accredited Network, these are companies that I have in which, as I invest in them, they can create cash flow for me. And, you know, that's really the best expression of my purpose and the best investment because I have so much more ability to manage it, to contribute to it, and so it has a lot less risk, yet I've had so much more return in those businesses because one of my businesses made the Inc. 500 because over 5 years it grew 600%. There's not a lot of investments out there that I could have put my money in and got the same return as my sole purpose.
Certainly not putting them in CDs and money market and 401K funds, that's for sure.
It would have been a little bit different in those, yeah.
Now, what is it that causes us? It's funny because I remember that as I was growing up as a kid, you know, the Great Depression was one of those catastrophic events that happened here in American history, and everybody was going broke and living out in the streets and trying to buy apples for a nickel and you name it. But there were a lot of people that were also making a lot of money during that time. And so here we're in this sort of, this is going to be about as bad as the Great Depression, and you can't get away from the fact that they're talking about how this economy is literally going down the toilet, and then all of a sudden we get into this survival mindset mode where there's just not enough, so we've got to hoard what we have and don't let anything go. But the truth is there is so much money, if that's really what you want to come down to, there is so much money out there floating around just waiting to have something to do with it. And this includes the global economy, not just in the United States, but around the world, as I was saying earlier. You get people like China, for instance, that are invested heavily in the United States because they felt it was a great return on their money, what we were doing. You get back to intellectual capital. How do we get away from the scarcity mentality and take a shot and realize there are just a lot of opportunities that when we have these potential bad recessions or depressions, these are the greatest times for people to start not only challenging their beliefs, but actually doing something about it?
Well, I'm glad you brought up the Great Depression because that is one of the, it wasn't only marketing that brought about these myths. The Great Depression was the biggest myth creator in the United States, at least. And, you know, that passed down from generation to generation for those people that were deeply entrenched in scarcity. And when and just for a quick second, too, here's what's interesting, Garrett, is the fact is
the banks were the enemies, and they were using that as a reason to get you to feel that they were safe and they were the good guys. They were taking homes from people, for Christ's sakes. That's what changed the fact that now they can't do that anymore, but they could then. They could just take your home because they weren't sure whether you were going to pay it. And then they turned around and said, no, but you'll want to put your money in us and feel safe, and they were the bad guys to begin with.
When they could just come and call a note due. I'm glad that they got rid of that. So you make a great point about there were a lot of people that prospered in the Great Depression. When people hear the Depression, they think about the third of the people that suffered, that lost their homes, that had no jobs, that really moved into this real state of survival and ultimate poverty. But there was a third of the population that really kind of maintained. Now, this was not easy to maintain. They maybe worked a little bit harder, and it wasn't necessarily a pretty picture. But what's really interesting and what I want to focus on is that still leaves 1/3 of people that actually prospered. Mm-hmm. A third of the people actually made more money, and more millionaires were made during the Great Depression than any other time in the United States. So what did they know? What did they see? What did they do? Well, they knew that it was a bigger problem than we had ever faced before, and people needed leadership and people needed solutions. And if they could just see the opportunity rather than the despair, they could create massive value and make a bunch of money. So that was a big aspect of it. They also focused more on their personal economy rather than the world economy. The world economy, if you hear it's going to crap and everything's bad and you pay attention to that impacts your economy. Your personal economy is, look, there's plenty going on out there, but what can I personally do right now? How could I serve people? How can I solve problems? How can I create value? That's a useful way to look at life, and choose not to participate in those negative conversations unless it's to shift them to more wealthy conversations. I mean, there's this kind of like rubber band effect. Someone doesn't even know we're in a recessionary period until they turn on the news, and then they start acting like it's a recession. Their conversations engage around recessionary type conversations, and then they let fear dominate. Mm-hmm. The way that I have the thing that's really helped me overcome that is I just have a daily ritual that I wake up and I commit to creating favorable conditions to be productive. So what I do is I exercise, I enrich my mind by listening to my iPod, reading books, and then I also do some things like pray and meditate, which is kind of my personal practice, and then that sets forth better conditions. I'm more alive and I'm more proactive and I'm more abundant throughout the day, and that's kind of what I think is putting on my shield to protect me against the scarcity mindset, the recessionary type thinking, so I can be a leader amidst all this chaos. And in doing that, there's tons of profitability, there's tons of opportunity, and a lot of people go, oh, but I don't have resources. But we talked about the mental resources, we talked about the relationship resources. And people even have financial resources, they're just afraid to do anything. They lose money and then they still continue contributing to the 401K. They continue at the same allocation. They just think that one day it's going to get better. And this show, we're talking people in their 50s. I mean, what's going on? Is that how you want to live? What if you get to retirement and you're absolutely afraid you might run out of money? Exactly. What you got to do is forget that notion and think, what can you do that allows you to create value so you can have a little bit of control over your destiny and get paid for it, but ultimately have it be something that you enjoy. And it might take some thinking. It may be hard to set up, but it sets up for a much better life moving forward.
If it's any consolation to you, Garrett, the 5 years that we actually celebrated our 5th year on the air here this month, actually, is that we approach Beyond 50 with an attitude where retirement really isn't even part of the language. That's fine if AARP wants to do that. If you take a look at their magazines and anything they do online, it's all traditional. It's all just buying to safety. When in the end, just like what we're talking about, what you're buying into is the fact that you're getting tangled up like a fish in a net. And we try to show and share resources where people start thinking, well, let's get away from the fact that I might outlive any money that I've saved. So what am I going to do about it? Instead of being in fear and making sure that you don't outlive your money, for instance. And what's really interesting about that is the fact that as people begin to wake up, they realize, if I started following my passions to begin with, if I had just done what inherently was inside of me to begin with, retirement would not even be part of my language. And I usually like to liken at times throughout the show when I've been doing it, examples of what I'm talking about. I don't think somebody like a Bill Gates is ever going to retire because his passion is in that industry. Dr. Seuss died penning his last book, so to speak, at the age of 87. This was a guy who had a particular passion. Now, those could be extreme icon examples, but the point is it's inside of all of us. Why we ever bought into the retirement myth and the fear that we may grow older than our money is sometimes astounding to me, why we buy into those things.
Yeah, it's a sure way to die, is to retire.
Isn't that the truth?
To take out of service. I mean, if you lose purpose and you lose the ability to have some say in your money more than just the stock market, and you lose some of those relationships that you cultivate on a daily basis, you start losing the number of years that you're going to stay on this planet. And why would you spend your whole life accumulating a nest egg just to bankrupt it in retirement? It's because people aren't loving what they do is a big part of it, and they don't know what to do differently. I mean, that's a big reason I wrote this book, is to give people some hope and to see that there is a different way. And that if I just shared my clients, we just brought them on this line one after another, I would have a hard time ever knowing that there was a recession. Because there's so many people out there succeeding, doing great things, making good money, but it wasn't that they always had it that way. They went through those real moments, those defining moments, where they had this crossroads and they chose a path that was difficult at first, but led to massive opportunity because they had enough passion to see it through, that they were willing to be persistent, they could have some vision, and it's that vision that cultivates the real leadership within someone and allows them to express their sole purpose, and that type of energy is where money follows. That's what people want to spend money on. And so, if people are kind of stuck, if people don't know what to do, I recommend, just from my standpoint, there's plenty that you can do. But if you don't know what to do, at least read Killing Sacred Cows as a starting point. If you're beyond 50, this is going to be critical for you to understand. And there's even other steps that you could take after that are going to be absolutely important to living a more fulfilled life and not having finance be this obstacle where it creates any fear or it's your primary reason for doing or not doing things. Financial freedom is when money is not a deterrent or not the determinant in how you live your life. It's just something that allows you to do what you want to do, but you have to know what you want to do is another part of it.
I got to tell you, Garrett, I'd like to have the opportunity down the road again to revisit this with you because this is one of those key element books that we like to talk about with our audience that helps clear away why we followed the herd mentality in the first place, which really doesn't work for a lot of people. I think that when you go in the direction, we're not saying that 401ks are bad. If that's what you want to do right now, then I guess that's a starting point for you. That, mutual funds are usually a safe, good investment. If that's what you want to do, that's fine. If you want to pick up Susie Orman books, then that's fine. If that's what you want to do, follow that herd mentality. But this is one of those that, to me, is those type of books that really cleans that slate and gets you to wake up to what's really, truly going on around you. And when you can take that opportunity to clear the fear, to quit buying into following the herd, that's why I kind of get a kick of the fact that you used a cow, because that's a herding creature.
It is.
Is that you stop looking at the back end of somebody else who's ready to walk off the cliff and realize, that you can actually invest in that cliff and put a turnpike into it if you need to. So now,
right.
And you have what's called the 401K Hoax Challenge. Tell us about that.
The 401K Hoax Challenge is basically there's people that have money that's going into 401k, that's in a 401k, and I know through this challenge that they can far outperform it by basically answering some questions and then having me personally mentor them. Mentoring is different than advising. I'm not telling you what to invest in. I'm mentoring so that you can get clarity on how you can contribute, how you can earn the best returns, how you can really create a comprehensive blueprint, and then I could bring in experts to actually fulfill on that. But the 401k hoax is a challenge where it's the only guarantee people are going to get in their 401k hoax. It's we're going to do, you pay for the program of 401k hoax if you're accepted, and we'll guarantee your money back. And where else do you get that kind of guarantee with the 401k? So it's personal mentoring one-on-one with me to take people through this process because I wanted to show and have examples of this book in motion. And for people that want to know more about that 401k hoax and to even get a free investor's guide, I'll give a gift to people listening. If you call on me, 888-346-6158. That's 888-346-6158. I'll give you a free investor's guide, and you can hear more detail on the 401k hoax, or you can go to 401khoax.com and read more about the challenge. But I guarantee that we're going to earn a whole lot more money and get people on the right track and give them, what we're talking about actually happening in their life because they've created the time, they've created the space. I've got an entire educational system that's online and on demand to support them through that, workbooks, and an entire network that helps fulfill on whatever that they build, because the problem with most people in finance is they're just licensed to sell something. Mm-hmm. So whatever, if you're going into them, they might ask good questions, but they'll probably sell you a stock, or they'll sell you life insurance, or whatever it is that they're licensed to do. And I could say that because that's what I used to do. I used to do life insurance first and mutual funds second when I started in financial services, and no matter what questions I asked and rapport I developed, I ended up selling that product. Now I've created a network of people that are experts in that depth, but they only fulfill on what makes sense based upon an entire plan that you create by me coaching you through and asking you the right questions.
Mm-hmm. Garrett, you give a wonderful story in there about what you're just talking about here that I think is really important for our listeners to know, and that is that the more you meet people at their point of need, regardless of what that is, the more you prosper. And you give a great story about a particular insurance agent, actually, where a gentleman came in and he was really concerned about a particular job that he was pursuing and the money that was being paid, and just wanted advice of whether or not this was the right direction to go. And simply the insurance agent, of course, is just sitting there. And this was a guy that was already a customer of this insurance agent, if I remember. And he really didn't hear what the guy was asking, much less give any kind of advice. Turned around and tried to evaluate and sell him actually more. And the guy not only was lost as a client, but never came back again. And so many times I think if people would understand the value, just as you say consistently in your book, where in this world can you create value, that you would begin to see that the financial opportunities and investments, and it doesn't take a whole lot of money to do this in many cases, that the more value you can add, the more that you can meet people at their point of need, the more you create value, as you say, the more prosperity you'll have. It's amazing, as you've said consistently, and what I love about books like Killing Sacred Cows is that it opens your mind to see that when things get bad, this is when you wake up and go, man, it is time to party and actually make things happen.
This is unprecedented.
Doesn't that make sense to you, though?
Yeah, it's like I was up at 3 this morning, I'll admit, and I was working on a bunch of the workbooks that just going through them, coming through them, making sure they're as perfected as possible and as relevant to today as possible, and making those changes. Because I see the massive purpose, especially in these times, and I have this, I get a little bit anxious because I know that there's this unprecedented opportunity of, I don't know if the window's 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, based upon everything that's going on. People are more willing to listen, number one, although they're a little bit indecisive. Number two, there's so many things out there that we could do to rearrange, to redirect, and to capitalize on everything that's happening that actually benefits our economy, and we could be responsible for the repairing of and the right direction. You're right. It is unprecedented and really exciting when it comes down to it.
Now, just, in closing, what is your opinion of our new president, and do you feel that he is that beacon of possible hope where people finally say, it's about time that we start taking our destiny into our own hands? Do you think that it's kind of all talk, or do you see that there's really some true inspiration there that will move people forward?
There's a word that people don't like to use, or that they've kind of thrown away, or they've made it be something that's bad. But that word's rhetoric. People like dismiss rhetoric, but the thing is, there is such power to rhetoric, which really has to do with inventing something that doesn't already exist, being imaginative, and being inspirational, which are all aspects that people leave out when they use the negative connotation of rhetoric. And I got to tell you, I think Obama's a master of rhetoric. And the key is, if we take that to heart, and that moves people to be self-reliant and responsible, rather than thinking that he or someone else is going to do it for them, I have yet to hear someone more inspirational speak in my life. So I think his ability as an orator and as a speaker and as a visionary and as someone that's willing to take on this country as the president during this time is pretty amazing. I'm not saying that I agree with all of his policies or anything like that, but from an inspirational standpoint, I think he's extraordinarily inspiring, and that, yes, people now have a seed of hope. Can we water it? Can we give it some sunlight? Is yet to be seen. But I got to tell you, if he can run his presidency anything like he ran his campaign, we're in for a good ride. That's a good thing.
Yeah, I was thinking to myself during the whole time. I remember, my dad is a very staunch Republican, and I remember we were out at a barbecue one time, and he was, I don't know if I'm ready for Obama. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, that's fine. And so then after he became president, my dad, again, a staunch, hardcore Republican. So all those Democrats, they're all about government solving problems, and I believe that people should solve their own problems. And I'm thinking, did you listen to his campaign, and do you listen to what he's saying now? He's simply saying, and after he was elected, actually, my dad really changed his mind. He was thinking, I think this guy can actually do something. And okay, Dad, which side of the fence are you on here,
Yeah,
but what was funny
to the inauguration speech, if someone listened to the inauguration speech not knowing anything about Obama, that's just the first time they heard him, and they had to say whether he was a Republican or Democrat, I think it was hands down Republican. I mean, he talked about smaller government. He talked about, personal responsibility. I mean, he talked about the Constitution. I mean, from my perspective, I thought it was phenomenal, and I really enjoy. I was there in D.C. for the inauguration, and I love the energy. And I think it's great to have an African American president to break down, so much of these of the barriers and really to take another leap. And I'm glad that he's not making it about that either.
Well, that's just that was the point that I was making about what we were talking about, especially when I was talking with my own father, is I said, take a look at his leadership. Leaders inspire people to action, and what they also inspire people to do, great leaders inspire people to think. That's what we want to start seeing to happen. What I loved about what he was saying is the fact that look, I can't do this all by myself. This is about all of us. We're all in this together. Let's get off our butts and let's start doing something about it. And, when you take a look at your book, Killing Sacred Cows, that's exactly that. When you see the little 60-year-old, I lost all my money in the stock market, and the truth is, well, what did you do to manage all that? You realize, well, you lost it because you gave it away. You surrendered your power to do something about it. And I got to tell you, I'd like to revisit, the opportunity down the road to be able to have you back on the program, because we love consistently to have guests like you who kind of get away from the traditional follow the herd mentality and start getting people to think again, because as you say, that is our most valuable resource. As one of your quotes in your book by Napoleon Hill, more gold has been spun by thoughts than anything else.
Yep. And I would love to come back on and bring, let's say, a participant in the 401K hoax and talk about before and after, what they're learning, and, just let you candidly interview them, as part of that show.
Very good. Well, Garrett, why don't you go ahead and give out a website where people can find out more about this again? I'm going to continue to read because I really enjoy what I've read so far. I think I've gotten through a third of the book, and I didn't expect the interview to come as quickly as I thought it did. But, as to go ahead and give people a website so they can find out more about, what you do and really kickstarting that brain, that real true financial capital that you have on your shoulders.
Yeah, killingsacredcows.com, killingsacredcows.com. That's a great site, or calling the toll-free 24-hour recorded line, 888-346-6158, 888-346-6158. Either one of those is a great way to get started and to get some basic information to investigate what's possible for you.
Well, Garrett Gunderson, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today. It's always a pleasure to have guests like you that help kind of rattle the cages of those, especially that are beyond 50, doing the herd thing. Because I think it was J.P. Getty once said, observe the masses and do the opposite.
Yeah, and Buffett says the same thing, too. So that's pretty good.
Very good. Well, thank you again for joining us on the program today. It's been a pleasure to talk with you.
Have a wonderful day.
You bet. And there it is, Killing Sacred Cows. Start using that true financial capital that you have. It's right on top of your shoulders. Great book, very enjoyable. Overcoming the financial myths that are destroying your prosperity. We don't want to do that anymore as well. Be sure to visit us on our website at beyond50radio.com. That's the number 50 with a 50. And also sign up for our free weekly e-newsletter where we have all these resources available. No more excuses. Don't surrender it. Just do the right thing by doing the right thing by yourself. I'm Daniel Davis. You've been listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. Thank you for tuning in. And remember, live your day past halfway.